The church bell was ringing softly in the distance, its echo floating through the quiet Sunday morning air. Birds flew across the pale blue sky, and the streets were calm, as if the whole town was walking toward peace. And then it happened. On that bright morning, Grandma Ruth was walking alone, just as she had done every Sunday for the past 30 years. Her Bible was tucked under her arm, and she leaned a little on her wooden cane as she crossed the narrow road that led to St. Mary's Church. Neighbors who often saw her admired her strength. She was 80 years old, but she never missed a single Sunday service. But this Sunday was different. She reached the middle of the road, lifted her face to the sun, and smiled faintly. Suddenly, her cane slipped. Her knees shook, and before anyone could understand what was happening, Grandma Ruth's body swayed like a falling tree. Her Bible slid from her arm, landing with a soft thud on the dusty ground. Then, she collapsed. Her fragile body hit the road, her head narrowly missing a stone by the roadside. The bell was still ringing, and people nearby gasped in shock. Someone screamed, "Grandma Ruth," and rushed toward her. But her eyes were closed. She wasn't moving. And just as people gathered around, holding their breath in fear, one man bent down, pressed his fingers on her neck, and shouted, "She's not breathing." The crowd froze, and the peaceful Sunday morning turned into chaos. How did this happen? Why did Grandma Ruth, who always looked so strong, suddenly collapse? To understand that, we must go back a little, to the days before the shocking Sunday. Grandma Ruth was known in the small town of Westridge as the woman of unshakable faith. Rain or shine, she walked alone to church every Sunday, never asking anyone for help. People offered many times her daughter, neighbors, even the pastor himself. But she always smiled and said, "The Lord is my strength. If I can walk, I will walk for him." Her walk to church was not an easy one. The distance was about 2 miles, and the path had small hills and rocky spots. But to her, it was not just walking, it was worship. With every step, she whispered prayers. She prayed for her children, her grandchildren, her neighbors, even strangers she met on the way. And everyone in Westridge respected her for it. To the children, she was the kind grandma who always carried peppermint candy in her pocket. To the adults, she was the strong woman who had raised 4 children all by herself after her husband passed away young. To the church, she was a pillar of faith, always the first to arrive, sitting in the front pew with her Bible open. But behind that strength, Grandma Ruth carried a secret. Her health had been failing. The truth was, her knees had been hurting for months, sometimes so badly she could hardly climb the stairs to her bedroom. Her chest sometimes tightened when she walked too fast, and at night, she often woke up gasping for breath. But she never told anyone. Not her daughter, not her grandchildren, not even the pastor. "Why worry them?" she whispered to herself. "They all have their own troubles. And God will take care of me." But the signs were there, and if you looked closely, you could see them. Her pace had slowed. Her steps were heavier. Sometimes she stopped in the middle of the road, pretending to look at flowers or greet a child, but in truth, she was catching her breath. Still, she kept walking. Every Sunday. Alone. Until that fateful day. The night before her collapse was unusually quiet. Ruth sat in her old wooden chair by the window, her Bible open on her lap. The moonlight slipped into her room, making her silver hair glow softly. She prayed longer than usual that night, whispering names one by one. Her children, her grandchildren, her neighbors, the pastor, the sick woman across the street. Even the little boy who always stole mangoes from her backyard tree. Then she closed her Bible and said softly, "Lord, tomorrow I will walk again, even if it is my last." The next morning, she dressed in her clean blue gown, the one she always wore to church. She tied her scarf carefully, tucked her Bible under her arm, and stepped outside. Her neighbor, Mrs. Carter, saw her from across the street and called out, "Ruth, let me drive you today. You look tired." But Grandma Ruth only smiled. "Thank you, dear, but I must walk. It is my offering." And so she walked. Her first steps were steady. The birds were singing, and she whispered prayers with each step. But as she went further, her chest tightened. Sweat rolled down her face even though the morning was cool. Her cane tapped the ground slowly. She paused once, pretending to watch the sunrise, but really she was fighting the pain in her chest. And yet, she pressed on, until she reached the middle of the road. And then, she collapsed. The crowd gathered quickly. Children cried. Adults shouted for help. Someone ran to the church to call the pastor. Others tried to lift her carefully, but she was limp in their arms. Her Bible lay open on the ground, the wind flipping through its pages. One verse seemed to stay in place, as if the wind had chosen it. It read, "My strength is made perfect in weakness." But would she ever open her eyes again? Would Grandma Ruth rise once more, or had her last walk already been written? As the people surrounded her, one man shouted, "We need to get her to the hospital now." And in that moment, something unexpected happened. Grandma Ruth's lips moved. Nobody heard what she said. Her voice was faint, like a whisper carried away by the wind. But her lips were moving. The crowd leaned closer, straining to hear her final words. And that was the moment before everything changed. The crowd froze. Everyone leaned closer, desperate to catch the sound of her faint whisper. Her lips trembled as though she was trying to say something important, something urgent, but the words were too soft for anyone to understand. "Did she say something?" a woman asked. I think she said a name," someone replied. "But who?" The man who had checked her pulse shook his head. "Her breathing is weak. We can't waste time. We must take her now." Two men carefully lifted her frail body. Her Bible was picked up by a small boy who clutched it tightly, as if holding something sacred. The crowd hurried toward the church gates, where a car was parked. The pastor, who had been alerted, came running, his white robe flowing in the morning breeze. "Ruth," he cried, his voice breaking. "Stay with us, sister. Stay with us." They placed her gently in the back seat of the car, and the pastor slid in beside her, holding her hand. Her skin felt cold, her pulse faint. The driver sped off toward the small hospital on the edge of town, leaving the crowd standing in silence. Inside the car, Ruth's eyelids fluttered. She opened them just a little, enough to see the pastor's worried face. She tried to speak again, her lips forming the words slowly. "Tell them," she whispered. "Tell them what, Ruth?" The pastor leaned closer. But her strength failed her, and her eyes closed once more. News of the collapse spread quickly through Westridge. Children ran from house to house shouting, "Grandma Ruth fainted on the road." Phones rang, doors slammed, and whispers filled the air. At her daughter Evelyn's house, the phone rang loudly. Evelyn, a woman in her late 40s with tired eyes from working long shifts, picked it up. The voice on the other end spoke fast and panicked. "Your mother. She collapsed on her way to church." They rushed her to the hospital. The phone slipped from Evelyn's hand. Her teenage son, Daniel, picked it up and listened, his eyes widening. "Mom, Grandma's in the hospital." Evelyn grabbed her car keys, her hands trembling. "Let's go," she cried. Within minutes, Evelyn, her son Daniel, and her younger daughter Grace were on the road, racing toward the hospital. Evelyn's heart pounded. She had noticed her mother slowing down these past months, but every time she asked, Ruth only smiled and said, "I'm fine." Evelyn had believed her. She wanted to believe her. But now she regretted every moment she stayed silent. At the hospital, Ruth was rushed into the emergency room. The doctors and nurses moved quickly, attaching wires, checking her heart, giving her oxygen. The family arrived just as the doors closed behind her. Evelyn tried to push in, but a nurse stopped her. "Please wait outside," she said firmly. So Evelyn sat in the waiting area, her face buried in her hands. Daniel paced up and down, fists clenched, while Grace cried softly in the corner. The pastor joined them, his expression heavy with sorrow. Minutes felt like hours. The sound of machines and footsteps echoed through the hallway. Finally, the doctor stepped out, his face calm but serious. "She is stable for now," he said. "But her heart is very weak. She needs rest, and most importantly, she needs care." She has been hiding her illness for too long. Hiding? Evelyn asked, shocked. The doctor nodded. Yes. Her body shows signs of long-term strain. It seems she's been pushing herself beyond her limits. Has she mentioned any chest pains or difficulty breathing? Evelyn shook her head slowly. No, she never told us. The pastor sighed deeply. She kept it from all of us. She always wanted to be strong for others. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. Why didn't she trust us? Why didn't she say anything? Inside the hospital room, Grandma Ruth lay on the bed, her face pale but peaceful. Machines beeped softly beside her. The Bible, which the little boy had carried, now rested on the table by her side. Its pages were still open, and that same verse showed, "My strength is made perfect in weakness." The pastor leaned over and whispered, "Ruth, you are not alone anymore." Hours passed. Ruth stirred slightly, opening her eyes. She saw her daughter sitting by her bedside, holding her hand tightly. "Mother," Evelyn whispered. "You scared us. Why didn't you tell me you were sick?" Ruth smiled faintly. "Because I wanted to walk. I wanted to show faith. I didn't want to be a burden." "You could never be a burden," Evelyn cried. "We love you. We would have helped you." Ruth's eyes glistened. "I know. But sometimes, love makes us hide our weakness. I didn't want you to worry." The family leaned close, their tears falling onto her blanket. For a moment, it seemed everything would be okay. She was alive. She was with them. She could still speak. But just as peace was settling in the room, something unexpected happened. The heart monitor suddenly beeped faster. The green line on the screen jumped erratically. Nurses rushed in, shouting for assistance. "Her heart rate is dropping," one of them cried. The doctor stormed in, barking orders. Evelyn was pushed aside as the medical team surrounded the bed. "Stay with us, Ruth," the doctor shouted. Evelyn screamed, "Mom," as she tried to reach for her, but the nurses held her back. The sound of the machine filled the room fast, then slow, then flat. A long, sharp beep cut through the air. The family froze. "Code blue," a nurse shouted. And in that terrifying moment, Grandma Ruth's body went still. The piercing sound of the flat line filled the room. It was the sound everyone feared, the sound that made hearts stop in terror. Nurses rushed around the bed, one of them climbing onto a stool to begin chest compressions. Another prepared the defibrillator. Evelyn stood frozen in the corner, her hands pressed to her mouth, while Daniel held Grace tightly, trying to shield her from the scene. "Charge to 200, the doctor barked. The machine whined as it charged. Then, "Clear." The doctor pressed the paddles against Ruth's chest. Her frail body jerked violently, then fell still again. The monitor beeped once, then flatlined again. "Charge to 300. Clear." Another shock. Another jolt. Evelyn cried out, "Please, God, don't take her from us yet." And then, a small miracle. The green line on the screen flickered. A faint beep, then another, then another. Her heart was beating again. Weak, but steady. Everyone in the room let out a sigh of relief. Evelyn collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down her face. Daniel buried his head in his hands, whispering, "Thank you, Lord." The doctor exhaled heavily and looked at the family. "She's back. But listen to me carefully, she is very fragile. Her heart can't take much more. You need to prepare yourselves." Those words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Later that evening, the hospital room was quieter. Ruth lay unconscious, her breathing supported by oxygen. Evelyn sat beside her, stroking her hand. The children dozed off in the corner, their small bodies curled in chairs. The pastor stood by the window, deep in thought. Evelyn finally broke the silence. "Pastor, do you think she knew this would happen?" The pastor nodded slowly. "Yes, I believe she did. She kept whispering about preparing something, about telling you all something important." Evelyn frowned. But what could it be? Before the pastor could answer, the door creaked open. It was Mrs. Carter, the neighbor who had offered Ruth a ride that morning. She stepped inside, holding a small brown envelope. "I found this in her mailbox," she said softly. "It's addressed to you, Evelyn. It was dated just yesterday." Evelyn's hands trembled as she took the envelope. Slowly, she opened it, and inside was a letter written in Ruth's neat, old-fashioned handwriting. Her voice cracked as she read aloud. "My dear Evelyn, if you are reading this, it means my time may be near. Do not cry for me, for I have lived a long and blessed life. But there is something I must tell you, something I could never say face to face. I have carried a secret for many years, and before I leave this world, you must know the truth." The words stopped Evelyn cold. She stared at the paper, her hands shaking. "A secret?" Daniel asked, sitting up. "What kind of secret?" Grace whispered, "Grandma doesn't keep secrets." But she had. Evelyn's eyes continued down the page, her lips trembling as she read silently. Her face went pale. She pressed the letter to her chest, tears falling onto the paper. "What is it, Mom?" Daniel asked urgently. "What does it say?" Evelyn shook her head, unable to speak. The pastor stepped closer, concern etched on his face. "Evelyn, what is it?" She finally whispered, "It's about my father." The room fell silent. "You mean Grandpa Thomas?" Daniel asked. "But he died when you were little." Evelyn's eyes filled with pain. She looked at the letter again, then at her children. "That's what I was told. That's what I believed my whole life." Her voice cracked as she said the next words. "But this letter says he might still be alive." The room erupted in shock. "What?" Daniel shouted. "Alive? How?" Grace's small voice trembled. "But why would Grandma lie?" Evelyn shook her head, staring at her mother's frail body on the hospital bed. "I don't know. I don't know why she kept this from me." The pastor stepped forward, his voice calm but heavy. "If what she says is true, then there are things about her past she never wanted anyone to know. And maybe she was trying to protect you." Evelyn pressed her face into her hands, sobbing. "Why, Mother? Why keep such a secret from your own child?" That night, Evelyn sat awake by her mother's bedside, the letter clutched tightly in her hands. She remembered the stories Ruth used to tell, how she would always speak lovingly of Thomas, how his death was always painted in soft words, but never with detail. Now Evelyn wondered, had her whole life been built on a lie? She leaned close to her mother, whispering, "Please wake up, Mama. Please tell me the truth yourself. Don't leave me with just this letter." But Ruth remained still, her chest rising and falling slowly with the help of the oxygen mask. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the window, Evelyn stood outside the hospital room to make a phone call. She had decided to search for answers. If her father was alive, she needed to know. She needed to uncover the truth. But just as she ended the call, she heard commotion from the room. Nurses were rushing in again. Evelyn's heart leapt in fear as she ran inside. This time, Ruth was awake. But she was thrashing weakly, her eyes wide with panic. The heart monitor beeped wildly. She was trying to pull off the oxygen mask, her hands trembling. The doctor shouted, "Hold her down gently. She's in distress." Evelyn rushed to her side. "Mother, please calm down. I'm here." Ruth's lips moved quickly, desperate to speak. Evelyn leaned closer. "Don't let him find you," Ruth gasped, her voice ragged. "Who?" Evelyn cried. "Who are you talking about?" Ruth's eyes rolled back, and her body went limp again. The machine screamed. Nurses scrambled. The doctor shouted orders. And once again, the question burned in Evelyn's mind. Who was Grandma Ruth so afraid of? The room was chaos once again. Machines beeped wildly, nurses swarmed around the bed, and Evelyn stood frozen, her mother's words ringing in her ears. "Don't let him find you." Who is he? Evelyn's knees nearly gave out as she clutched the side of the bed. The doctor barked orders, pushing medication into Ruth's foreline. Slowly, the storm in her body began to calm. The heart monitor steadied. Her breathing evened out. "She's stable again," the doctor sighed, wiping his forehead. "But she cannot endure much more of this. Her body is too weak." Evelyn nodded numbly, but her mind was far away. She kept hearing her mother's voice in her head, those broken words that sounded more like a warning than the ramblings of a sick woman. Later that day, after the nurses cleared the room, Evelyn sat with the pastor in the hospital cafeteria. The letter was laid out on the table between them. Daniel and Grace sat nearby, listening quietly. She said, "Don't let him find you," Evelyn whispered. "Pastor, who could she be talking about? And what does it have to do with my father?" The pastor stroked his beard thoughtfully. "I've known Ruth for more than 20 years. She was always strong, always faithful. But there was one thing she never spoke about, the years before she came to Westridge. Perhaps the answer lies there." Daniel leaned forward. "So you're saying Grandma had a whole part of her life we don't know about?" The pastor nodded. "Yes. And from the sound of it, she may have been running from something or someone." Evelyn's stomach tightened. She thought about her childhood. Her mother had always avoided questions about the past. Whenever Evelyn asked about her father, Ruth would smile sadly and say, "He's with the Lord now." But she never showed pictures. She never told stories. Just silence. Now, the silence was cracking open. That night, Evelyn returned home to gather some of her mother's belongings. In Ruth's bedroom, everything looked just as it had for years. Neat, simple, untouched. But Evelyn noticed something strange. The old wooden chest at the foot of the bed, the one her mother had always kept locked, was slightly open. Her heart pounded as she knelt and pulled it closer. Inside, beneath layers of folded shawls, she found a bundle of yellowed letters tied with ribbon. Some were addressed to Ruth in neat handwriting. Others were marked "Return to Sender." Hands trembling, she opened one. "My dearest Ruth, I am sorry for what happened. Please forgive me. I promise I will find you and make things right. You and our daughter mean everything to me. Do not hide from me. One day, I will come for you. T." Evelyn's breath caught. T? Her father's name was Thomas. Could these letters be from him? She read another. "You cannot run forever, Ruth. You know what I want. And if you don't give it to me, I will take it. Don't think distance will protect you." This one was different. The handwriting was harsher, the tone darker. Evelyn's chest tightened as she read the words again. Was this the same man? Or someone else entirely? And then, at the bottom of the chest, she found something that made her blood run cold. A photograph. It was of her mother, much younger, standing beside a tall man with piercing eyes. He wasn't smiling. His arm was around her mother's shoulders, but his grip looked firm, almost possessive. On the back of the photo, in faded ink, were the words, "Me and Ruth, 1969. But the name sign beneath it wasn't Thomas. It was Edward. Evelyn's hands shook so badly she almost dropped the picture. "Edward," she whispered. "Who is Edward?" The next morning, Evelyn returned to the hospital with the letters and the photograph. She sat by her mother's side, waiting for her to wake. When Ruth finally stirred, Evelyn leaned close and whispered, "Mother, please, tell me the truth. Who is Edward? And why were you afraid of him finding us?" Ruth's eyes opened slowly, filled with both fear and sorrow. She looked at the photograph in Evelyn's hand and gasped. Her lips trembled, and tears rolled down her cheeks. "Burn it," she whispered weakly. "Burn it all. Don't let him see it. Don't let him know." "Who is he, Mama?" Evelyn pressed. "Is he my father?" Ruth shook her head. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "No. He's worse." Evelyn's heart raced. "Then who?" Before Ruth could answer, the door burst open. A nurse entered, carrying a clipboard. Behind her, a tall man in a dark coat stood in the doorway, his shadow stretching across the floor. He looked older now, his hair streaked with gray, but his piercing eyes were unmistakable. The same eyes from the photograph. Evelyn froze, the photo slipping from her hand. The man smiled faintly. "Hello, Ruth," he said in a deep voice. "It's been a long time." Ruth's weak cry filled the room. "Edward." The room fell into silence. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as the tall man stepped forward, his shoes clicking softly against the hospital floor. His piercing eyes locked onto Ruth, and the weak woman trembled, clutching her blanket as though it could protect her. "Edward," Ruth whispered again, her voice laced with fear. The man smirked, as if hearing his name from her lips gave him satisfaction. He walked closer to the bed, ignoring Evelyn, Daniel, and Grace, who stood frozen in shock. "It's been too long," he said softly, though his tone carried a dangerous edge. "I told you I would find you one day." "Get out," Ruth rasped, her frail hand trembling as she tried to push herself up in bed. "You don't belong here." Edward tilted his head, pretending to look hurt. "Is that how you greet an old friend? After everything we've been through?" Evelyn's heart raced. "Who are you?" she demanded, stepping in front of her mother's bed. "What do you want with her?" Edward's eyes flicked to Evelyn, and for a moment, his cold expression softened into something else, recognition. "So," he murmured, "this must be Evelyn. You've grown." Evelyn's eyes widened. "How do you know my name?" Before Edward could answer, Ruth shouted weakly, her voice breaking, "Don't talk to her. Leave my family alone." Her sudden outburst set off the monitors again, her heart rate spiked, alarms ringing through the room. Nurses rushed in, trying to calm her, but she kept pointing at Edward. "Get him out. Get him out," she cried, tears running down her cheeks. Edward raised his hands as if to appear innocent, but his eyes glimmered with something darker. "Relax, Ruth. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I just came for what belongs to me." The doctor, sensing the tension, ordered security to escort Edward out. 2 guards appeared and stood on either side of him. "This isn't over," Edward said calmly as they led him away. His eyes lingered on Evelyn and the children before he finally turned and walked down the hall. The moment he left, Ruth collapsed against her pillows, sobbing. Evelyn grabbed her hand. "Mother, please. Who is he? What does he want?" Ruth's lips trembled as she whispered, "Edward is not your father." "But he destroyed everything." Hours later, when Ruth was stable again, Evelyn sat at her bedside with the letters and photograph. "Mama," she said softly, "I found these in your chest. Please tell me the truth. I can't protect you or the children if I don't know what happened." Ruth closed her eyes, gathering strength. Then, in a fragile voice, she began to speak. "Edward was a man I met before I married Thomas. At first, he was charming, kind, or so I thought. But behind the smile, he was dangerous. Controlling. He wanted everything his way. And when I tried to leave, he threatened me." Evelyn shivered. "Threatened you? With what?" Ruth's eyes filled with tears. "With you. You weren't even born yet, but he swore that if I didn't stay with him, he would take my child away." I was terrified. Evelyn's throat tightened. "But then you married Dad?" Ruth nodded. "Yes. By God's grace, I escaped Edward. I met Thomas, a good man, a gentle man. He loved me despite the scars Edward left on my heart. For a few years, I had peace. We built a life. And then," her voice cracked, "and then Thomas disappeared." Evelyn froze. "Disappeared? But you told me he died." Ruth shook her head, sobbing. "I lied to protect you. The truth is, I never found his body. He left one morning for work and never came back. The police searched, but there was no trace. Deep inside, I feared Edward had something to do with it. But I had no proof. So I told you he had died because the truth was too painful." Evelyn's heart pounded as she tried to take it all in. "So, you think Edward might have killed Dad?" Ruth turned her face away, whispering, "I don't know. But I know Edward never stopped searching for me. For us." Daniel, who had been listening silently, clenched his fists. "Then why is he here now? What does he want after all these years?" Ruth looked at him with weary eyes. "Because he thinks something belongs to him. And he won't stop until he gets it." That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She sat in the hospital corridor, the letter and photo spread out before her. Every word, every image was a puzzle piece that didn't fit. Who exactly was Edward? What did he want? And most importantly, was her father really dead? She pulled out her phone and dialed an old family friend, Mr. Harris, who had known her parents when she was a child. When he answered groggily, she asked, "Mr. Harris, what do you know about Edward?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, the old man spoke in a shaken voice. "Evelyn, where did you hear that name?" "My mother," she replied. "He came to the hospital today." She was terrified. Please, tell me what you know. Mr. Harris's voice trembled. Edward wasn't just some man from her past. He was dangerous, very dangerous. People whispered he had ties to crime. Ruth ran from him for good reason. If he's back, Evelyn, you and your children are in danger. Evelyn's blood ran cold. But why now? Why after all these years? The old man hesitated. Then he said something that shook her to the core. Because, Evelyn, Edward isn't after your mother anymore. He's after you. The next morning, Evelyn rushed to the hospital, her mind racing with fear. But when she pushed open the door to Ruth's room, her heart nearly stopped. The bed was empty. The blankets were tossed aside. The 4 tubes hung loose. And on the table, where Ruth's Bible had been, there was only a single piece of paper. In neat, cold handwriting, it read, "She's with me now. If you want her back, don't involve the police." Evelyn's knees buckled when she read the note. Her hands trembled so badly that the paper slipped from her grip and floated to the floor. "She's with me now. If you want her back, don't involve the police." The words burned in her mind. Daniel rushed forward, picked up the paper, and read it aloud. His face twisted with anger. He took her. He actually took Grandma. Grace's voice broke into a sob. But how? How could anyone just take her out of a hospital? Evelyn's heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst. She grabbed her daughter, pulling her close. We'll find her. I promise. But her own voice shook with fear. The pastor, who had just arrived with coffee in his hand, froze as he heard the words. He read the note himself, then whispered a prayer under his breath. Lord, protect her. Lord, give us strength. The hospital was thrown into confusion. Nurses swore they had just checked on Ruth an hour earlier. No one had seen Edward enter the room. Security cameras showed a tall man in a dark coat walking through the side exit, but the footage cut off after that, like someone had tampered with it. This was planned, the pastor said grimly. He knew what he was doing. Evelyn wanted to scream. Every second that passed felt like her mother was slipping further away. She thought about calling the police, but the warning on the note echoed in her head. Don't involve the police. What if he hurts her? She whispered. Daniel slammed his fist against the wall. We can't just sit here. We have to do something. Evelyn turned to him, her eyes fierce. You're right. We'll find her. But we need to be smart. If Edward wanted us to panic, we can't give him that. Grace sniffled, her little voice shaking. But where would he take her? That question hung in the air like smoke. Later that night, Evelyn returned home to gather her thoughts. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at the letters she had found in the chest. Some were gentle, almost pleading. Others were dark, threatening. And then, at the bottom of the pile, she noticed one she hadn't read before. Her hands shook as she unfolded it. Ruth. You can run from me, but you cannot run from the truth. She will always be mine. She carries my blood, not his. One day she will understand, and when she does, you won't be able to hide her from me. Edward. Evelyn's stomach dropped. She will always be mine. The words echoed in her head until she felt dizzy. Was Edward saying that she, Evelyn, was his daughter? Her throat went dry. She pushed the letter away, shaking her head violently. No, it can't be true. My father was Thomas. He loved us. Her voice broke. Daniel picked up the letter and read it, his jaw tightening. Mom, what if he's telling the truth? Evelyn snapped. Don't say that. Don't even think it. But her own heart wavered. Grace whispered, if Grandma was hiding this, maybe she didn't want you to know. Evelyn pressed her face into her hands, sobbing quietly. She didn't want to believe it. But deep down, something told her that Edward's return wasn't just about Ruth. It was about her. The next day, Evelyn decided she couldn't sit still any longer. Against her better judgment, she contacted Mr. Harris again. I need to know the truth, she said over the phone. All of it. About Edward. About my father. About me. There was silence on the other end. Then Mr. Harris sighed. Meet me tomorrow night. Not here. Not at your house. It's too dangerous. I'll send you the place. Evelyn agreed, though her stomach twisted with unease. That evening, as Evelyn sat with her children, the doorbell rang. Daniel went to answer it, but no one was there. Instead, taped to the front door was a small package wrapped in brown paper. Evelyn carried it inside cautiously, her heart racing. She unwrapped it slowly and gasped. Inside was Ruth's scarf. The blue one she had worn to church that very morning when she collapsed. It was torn as though ripped in a struggle. And beneath the scarf was a photograph. It was of Ruth, tied to a chair in a dimly lit room. Her eyes were wide with fear, and a cloth was gagging her mouth. On the back of the photograph, written in Edward's sharp handwriting, were the words, "The past can't stay buried forever. If you want to see her alive, come alone." Evelyn dropped the photo, her hands trembling violently. Grace screamed, and Daniel snatched the picture from the floor, his face turning pale. "No," Evelyn whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Not like this, not her." She clutched the scarf to her chest, her voice breaking. "Mama." And then she realized something. Written faintly in pencil, almost hidden at the corner of the photograph, were numbers. A set of coordinates. Daniel's eyes lit up as he noticed it too. "Mom, this could be where he's keeping her." Evelyn's heart pounded. She wanted to believe it was a clue. But was it a trap? As the family huddled around the photograph, trying to decide what to do, headlights suddenly flashed through the window. A car had pulled up outside the house. The sound of a door slamming shut echoed in the night. And then, heavy footsteps began approaching their front door. The footsteps grew louder, crunching against the gravel, then echoing up the wooden porch. Evelyn held her breath, clutching Grace close to her chest. Daniel stood frozen, the photograph still in his hand. Knock. The sound made everyone jump. Another knock, this one harder, sharper. Evelyn glanced at her son. "Don't open it," she whispered. Her voice shook, but her eyes were firm. The knocks turned into pounding. Whoever was outside wanted in. Daniel whispered, "What if it's him?" Grace whimpered softly, burying her face into Evelyn's sweater. Evelyn held her tighter, her mind racing. "If it's Edward, what do I do?" And then a voice called through the door. "Evelyn." "It's me, Mr. Harris." "Open up, quickly." Evelyn's chest heaved with relief, though her hands were still trembling. She hurried to the door, peeking through the peephole just to be sure. And there he was, Mr. Harris, in his old brown coat, looking around nervously as though someone was watching him. She unlocked the door and pulled him inside. "You nearly gave us a heart attack." He shut the door fast and locked it again. His eyes scanned the room, landing on the photograph on the table. His face paled. "So he's already made contact." Evelyn frowned. "You knew he would, didn't you?" Mr. Harris sank into a chair, rubbing his tired face. "I was afraid of it. Edward doesn't do anything halfway. When he wants something, he won't stop until he gets it." Grace spoke up timidly. "Why is he doing this?" "Why, Grandma?" Mr. Harris sighed deeply. "Because Ruth is the only one who ever escaped him. And he can't stand that." Evelyn's stomach twisted. "Escaped him? You mean she knew him before?" He nodded slowly. "More than that. She was tied to him once. Far deeper than you realize." For the next hour, Mr. Harris told them what he knew. Years ago, before Evelyn was born, Ruth had been involved with Edward. He wasn't always the broken man he became, but he had darkness in him. A temper, a controlling nature. Ruth tried to leave him, but he wouldn't let her go. That's why she married Thomas so quickly, Mr. Harris explained. She wanted protection. She wanted to build a life far away from Edward. Evelyn's hands shook as she listened. "And me?" she asked softly. Is he my father?" Mr. Harris looked at her with sorrowful eyes. Ruth never said it outright. But the timing, it was always uncertain. Edward believed you were his, and he never let go of that thought. Evelyn's throat closed up. She couldn't breathe for a moment. Her whole identity, everything she thought she knew about her family, now felt like a lie. Daniel gripped her hand, whispering, "Mom, no matter what, you're still you." "That doesn't change." Tears spilled down Evelyn's cheeks. She pulled her children close, whispering, "I don't care whose blood runs through my veins. Thomas was my father. He raised me. He loved me. And nothing Edward says will take that away. Mr. Harris nodded slowly. Hold on to that truth. You'll need it. Evelyn showed him the photograph and the faint numbers written in the corner. Mr. Harris leaned forward, squinting. They look like coordinates, he said. But they're incomplete. It's like he wanted you to find him, but only if you're desperate enough to risk it. Evelyn's heart raced. It's a trap, isn't it? Mr. Harris didn't answer at first. Then he whispered, yes. But it may also be the only way to save Ruth. Silence hung heavy in the room. Daniel clenched his fists. We can't just sit here. Grandma's out there, tied up somewhere, scared out of her mind. We have to go. Grace looked up at her mother with wide, tearful eyes. Mom, we have to try. Evelyn closed her eyes. Fear clawed at her chest, but she knew her children were right. We'll go, she said finally. But we'll be ready. We'll outsmart him. Mr. Harris gave a grim nod. Then I'll help you prepare. But know this, Edward won't play fair. He never has. The night dragged on with maps spread across the kitchen table, flashlights tested, and whispered plans made. Still, dread lingered like a shadow over every word. Sometime past midnight, Evelyn stepped outside to clear her head. The night air was cold, the stars faint above. She wrapped her arms around herself, whispering a prayer. God, please, keep Mama safe. But as she stood there, she suddenly had the eerie feeling she wasn't alone. Her eyes darted across the yard. The bushes near the fence rustled faintly. Her breath caught. Hello, she whispered. No answer. Only the sound of crickets. She was about to turn back inside when something caught her eye, glinting on the porch railing. She stepped closer and froze. It was another envelope. Her heart pounded as she picked it up. The paper smelled faintly of smoke and something metallic. She tore it open with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet. On it, in Edward's sharp handwriting, were the words. You're wasting time. Every minute you stall, she grows weaker. Tomorrow at midnight. Come alone. Or she won't see another sunrise. And beneath the words, clipped to the paper with a rusty paperclip, was a lock of gray hair. Evelyn gasped, her knees nearly buckling. It was Ruth's hair. Her scream tore through the night, shattering the silence. Evelyn stood frozen on the porch, clutching the envelope in her trembling hands. Her eyes locked on the lock of gray hair clipped to the note. Her knees felt weak, her chest tight. Grace and Daniel rushed outside after hearing her scream. Daniel snatched the note from her hand, his face twisting with anger. He's playing with us. He's trying to break us down. Evelyn pulled both children close. It's real, she whispered, her voice shaking. It's Mama's hair. He's running out of patience. Mr. Harris stepped onto the porch behind them, his face pale as he read the note. Midnight. Alone. He won't back down this time. Daniel clenched his fists. Then let's end it. Tonight. Evelyn looked at her children's faces, scared, but determined. She felt torn apart inside. She wanted to protect them, but she also knew they couldn't stay behind. Edward was too dangerous. She took a deep breath. No matter what happens tonight, we stay together. The hours ticked by slowly. They packed a small bag with water, a flashlight, and the photograph with the coordinates. Evelyn tucked the note into her pocket, the words burning in her mind. At 11:30 p.m., Mr. Harris drove them down an old country road that wound through fields and into the dark woods. The headlights cut through the night, but every shadow looked like it was moving, every sound felt like a warning. Finally, they reached a clearing where an old, broken-down chapel stood. Its windows were shattered, the roof sagging, the cross at the top crooked. Evelyn's heart sank. He brought her here. They stepped out of the car, flashlights sweeping the ground. The silence was thick, except for the soft creak of the chapel door swinging in the wind. Stay behind me, Evelyn whispered, gripping Daniel's hand tightly as she pushed the door open. Inside, the chapel was dim, lit only by candles scattered along the walls. The air smelled of dust and smoke. At the front, near the altar, a chair had been placed. And in that chair, tied, weak, but alive sat Ruth. "Mom," Evelyn cried, running forward. But before she could reach her, a figure stepped out from the shadows. Edward. His face was gaunt, his eyes wild, yet there was something calculated in his stare. He smiled coldly. "I knew you'd come, Evelyn. Just like your mother always said you would. Brave and stubborn." Evelyn froze, shielding her children behind her. "Let her go, Edward. This ends tonight." He chuckled darkly. "It will, but not how you think." He reached into his coat and pulled out a knife, holding it loosely, almost casually. Grace whimpered, clinging to her mother. Evelyn's heart pounded. She forced herself to stand tall. "If it's me you want, then take me. Leave her out of this. Leave my children out of this." Edward's eyes narrowed. "I don't want to kill you, Evelyn. I want you to understand. You're mine. You always have been. Ruth kept you from me, but now you'll finally see the truth." Evelyn shook her head fiercely. "You're wrong. Blood doesn't make family, love does. And the man who raised me, Thomas, was my father. Not you. You'll never have me." Edward's face twisted with rage. He lunged forward. But in that moment, Mr. Harris stepped from behind and tackled him to the ground. The knife clattered across the floor. "Run, Evelyn!" Mr. Harris shouted. Daniel darted forward, grabbing the knife and tossing it far out of reach. Evelyn rushed to untie her mother, tears streaming as she pulled the ropes free. Ruth collapsed into her arms, whispering weakly, "You came for me." "Yes, Mama," Evelyn sobbed. "Always." Behind them, Edward and Mr. Harris struggled. Edward's strength seemed fueled by madness, but Harris held him down just long enough for Evelyn and her children to escape out the chapel doors with Ruth. They stumbled into the night, breathless, Ruth leaning on Evelyn's shoulder. Grace cried, clinging to her grandmother's other arm. Suddenly, a scream ripped through the night. It was Edward's voice, echoing from inside the chapel. Then silence. Moments later, Mr. Harris staggered out, blood on his forehead but alive. "It's over," he said hoarsely. "He's gone." Evelyn looked back at the dark chapel. A shiver ran down her spine. "Gone." Harris nodded slowly. "He won't hurt you again." She didn't press further. All that mattered was that her family was safe. Days later, Ruth lay resting at home, her frail hands clasped in Evelyn's. Her eyes were tired but full of love. "Evelyn," she whispered, "you showed me something I never had the courage to believe, that love is stronger than fear. Promise me you'll keep walking in that truth." Evelyn kissed her forehead. "I promise, Mama." Grace leaned in, holding her grandmother's hand gently. "Grandma, you're safe now." Ruth smiled faintly. "Yes, sweetheart. Because of all of you." Tears filled Evelyn's eyes, but this time they weren't only of sorrow. They were of relief, of gratitude. The lesson hung heavy in their hearts. That family isn't built on secrets or blood or control. It's built on love, sacrifice, and the courage to stand together, even in the darkest times. And as Evelyn looked at her mother, her children, and even Mr. Harris sitting quietly in the corner, she knew one thing for certain. They had walked through fire, but they had walked through it together. And that made them unbreakable.